When you look at an old photograph through like a vintage sepia-toned filter, everything just feels warm.
Oh, totally. It feels safe.
Right. The edges are beautifully blurred, the flaws are kind of washed out, and you are basically meant to feel comforted by the nostalgia.
Yeah, it creates a sort of collective cultural amnesia.
Exactly. For an entire generation, there are certain pop culture touchstones that we look at exclusively through that really soft, forgiving filter. We remember the feelings, the outfits, the music.
But we completely gloss over the actual mechanics of what was happening in the frame.
We really do. But if you take the original negative of that exact same photo and you strip away the filter and throw it down onto a glaring fluorescent medical light board,
Oh, wow, yeah. That changes everything.
suddenly you see the dust. You see the harsh, jagged contrast. You see the really dark anomalies hiding in the shadows that the filter was specifically designed to cover up.
It's jarring. You really can't unsee it once you look at it that way.
You can't. And that is exactly what we are doing today. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's going to be an intense one.
It is. Today, we are taking a paradigm-shifting, frankly mind-bending look at one of the most iconic, idolized romances of the late 90s and early 2000s. We are talking about Carrie Bradshaw and Mr. Big.
A cultural monolith, honestly.
Absolutely. For decades, this dynamic has been sold to us and consumed by us as the ultimate cosmopolitan fairy tale. It was, the blueprint for modern dating, glamour, and the relentless pursuit of the one.
It defined how millions of people viewed independence and friendship in a major city. But the foundation of that monolith is what we are investigating today because it turns out it's incredibly unstable.
Unstable is almost an understatement at this point. We have a massive stack of incredibly detailed, grounded sources in front of us today that are going to absolutely shatter that soft focus lens for you.
Yeah, the evidence we have is pretty undeniable.
We are looking at verbatim video transcripts of key episodes. We are looking at modern, viral video essays where new audiences are reevaluating these scenes with fresh eyes. And most importantly, we have a forensic analytical document.
It's a massive manifesto, really.
It is. It details what is called the Midtown Reality Theory.
And the Midtown Reality document is fascinating because it reads almost like a psychological autopsy. Its mission is to explore the incredibly dark, hidden truth that has been hiding in plain sight for over 20 years.
Right. The mission here is to reveal that Carrie is not the quirky, relatable, romantic heroine we were told she was.
Not even close.
Instead, the sources paint a picture of a deeply toxic, profoundly unreliable narrator, someone who is shockingly manipulative and, this is the absolute crux of it, physically abusive toward her partner.
That is the part that really stuns people when they first hear it.
She is, when you strip away the voiceover and the jazz music, the villain of her own story. So we are going to strip away the fabulous designer gloss and examine the gritty, uncomfortable reality of this dynamic.
We need to analyze what this tells us about relationships, about delusion, and about the genuinely dangerous blueprints that we sometimes idolize without questioning.
Exactly. Because when a society elevates a toxic dynamic as a romantic ideal, it has real-world consequences for you, the listener, and how people navigate their own lives.
It really does.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are going to track an entire behavioral descent today. We'll start with the most glaring, undeniable evidence of her volatility.
The physical violence behind closed doors.
Yes. Then we will look at how that inability to regulate her emotions bled into public social sabotage.
Which is a whole other mess.
It's a huge mess. We will uncover the massive financial delusion she constructed to hide her reality. We'll introduce a psychological theory about her friendships that will genuinely make your jaw drop.
I am so excited to get to that part.
And finally, we will reveal the true tragic fate of Mr. Big. I promise you massive aha moments today that will permanently change how you view this cultural touchstone.
So to understand the depths of this unreliability, we really have to start by shattering the illusion of the quirky romantic. And the sources draw our attention to a very specific, chilling scene that does exactly that.
This scene is the linchpin of the whole abuse argument. It takes place in the middle of the night. It's somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m.
Right, the middle of the night.
Big is fast asleep in his own bed, in his own apartment. Carrie wakes up. She is internally stewing over a series of grievances, and she violently punches him.
While he is asleep.
While he is completely unconscious.
And we need to be incredibly precise about the physical reality of this moment, The transcripts and the visual evidence from the source material make it clear that this is not like a light comedic slap.
No, it's not physical comedy.
It is not a dramatic, theatrical tap. The ferocity of the attack is severe. She hits a sleeping man hard enough to physically knock him out of the bed.
Wait, she literally knocks him onto the floor.
Yes, he hits the floor. And she leaves him with a visible, painful injury.
In the aftermath of that swing, we actually see him holding an ice pack to his bruised face. He remarks, quote, "It's ice for your face," which really highlights the physical swelling and the blunt force pain she just caused him.
It is a staggering moment of violence. And what is deeply disturbing, and what modern analyses have been pointing out relentlessly, is the psychology of her rationalization.
Yeah, let's talk about how she justifies this.
We have access to her internal monologue during this sequence, and the justification she crafts for committing battery is just chilling.
Let's break down that internal monologue. She is angry because earlier that evening, he smoked a cigar she didn't like.
A cigar.
Right. She is furious that he looks at other women, even in passing. She is resentful that she doesn't have a key to his apartment, and her final justification is that she is mad that he, quote, "can't make space for her in his bed."
Which is an incredible leap of twisted logic. I mean, truly. She takes her own unspoken emotional insecurities, like her anxieties about commitment and space, and translates them directly into a justification for physical assault.
It makes no sense.
She didn't sit down and communicate her needs. She didn't establish boundaries. She just let her resentment fester silently until it exploded into a physical attack on an unconscious person.
And the most manipulative part of this entire sequence is the apology. Or, well, more accurately, the complete lack of a genuine apology.
Oh, it is a masterclass in narcissistic manipulation. The sources break down her non-apology word for word. She tells him, "I know physical violence is never the answer."
Which sounds like taking responsibility at first.
It does, but she immediately follows it with an admission that she, quote, "lost a little of her power."
I want to pause on that exact phrasing. I lost my power. She doesn't center his pain at all.
Not even a little bit.
She doesn't express horror that she just battered a man she claims to love. She centers her own loss of control. The injury to her self-image is the only thing she cares about.
Exactly. And immediately after this hollow acknowledgement, she pivots. This is the crucial mechanism of her abuse.
Right, because what happens next is wild.
While he is literally on the floor, holding ice to the face she just punched, she forces him to listen to her list of emotional grievances. She uses the physical assault as an entryway to make demands.
It's essentially an extortion tactic. She creates a traumatic physical event, puts him on the defensive, and then says, "Well, now that I've assaulted you and have your full attention, I have to say this."
Yeah, she uses her own catastrophic lack of emotional regulation as a weapon to force a late-night confrontation.
And I want to pose a thought exercise to you, the listener, right now.
It's a really necessary one.
If you take this exact scenario and simply flip the genders, if a man woke up at 3 a.m., furious that his girlfriend wouldn't give him an apartment key, and he punched her so hard she flew out of bed and ended up on the floor with a bruised face requiring an ice pack.
Wow, yeah.
This would universally be classified as a terrifying depiction of intimate partner violence. It would be the inciting incident of a true crime documentary.
Oh, the police would be called immediately.
Absolutely. The character would be universally reviled as a dangerous abuser.
There would be no debate about it. It would be recognized instantly as criminal battery.
So how on earth did this level of abuse get historically brushed off as just, passionate, romantic frustration? How did millions of viewers watch a woman physically batter a man and just sigh and think, oh, relationships in the city are just so complicated?
That is where we have to look at the structural framing of the narrative itself. Because what's fascinating here is how an unreliable narrator can successfully launder their own violence.
Because it's all from her perspective.
Right. We have to remember that everything we see in this source material is filtered entirely through Carrie's lens. The conceit of the entire series is that we are watching the visual representation of her weekly column.
She holds the pen. She's the one typing the story we are consuming.
Precisely. Because she controls the narrative voiceover, she has the ultimate power to gaslight the audience.
And she does it so well.
She really does. She layers a light, jazzy, cosmopolitan soundtrack over the scene. She uses whimsical, pun-filled voiceovers to frame her abusive outburst as an act of righteous, albeit messy, female empowerment.
She softens the edges of her own brutality through post-production, essentially.
That's a great way to put it. She tells the audience how to feel about the violence, instructing us to view it as quirky passion rather than a severe behavioral red flag.
But the sources are meticulous in pointing out that this wasn't an isolated incident. Her physical volatility is a recurring pattern.
Yes, her baseline reaction is violence.
When she feels cornered or emotionally slighted, she physically lashes out.
Yeah.
Take the infamous street scene with the bridal bouquet.
Oh, the first movie provides a startling escalation of this exact behavior. The sources detail the scene where Big experiences a panic attack and gets cold feet before their massive, highly publicized wedding.
Right, he's freaking out.
He is driving away in a town car, realizing he cannot go through with the spectacle. She sees him, intercepts the car, and she absolutely loses her mind in the middle of a New York street.
She drags him out of the car and attacks him. She violently and repeatedly hits him with her tightly bound bridal bouquet, screaming, "I knew you would do this," in front of a massive crowd of onlookers in traffic.
And again, the audience is conditioned by the swelling, tragic music and the gorgeous Vivienne Westwood gown to view this as a moment of profound romantic heartbreak.
The aesthetic is totally designed to elicit sympathy for her.
Exactly.
But strip away the designer wedding dress.
Yeah.
Strip away the dramatic, emotional score. What you actually have is a woman physically assaulting a man in the middle of a busy intersection because he backed out of a contract.
Yeah, that's what a wedding is.
She is hitting him with a dense, heavy object over and over again, to the point where her friends actually have to run over and physically restrain her, literally dragging her off of him.
It is a complete and public loss of emotional regulation. When she feels insecure, her immediate recourse is physical violence or extreme public scene-making.
Right, she can't handle her own feelings.
And that inability to regulate herself behind closed doors naturally bleeds into his public life, which is a perfect transition into understanding the social dynamics of their relationship.
Right, because that kind of volatility doesn't just stay in the bedroom or the street. It infiltrated his professional and social spheres.
It poisoned everything.
We've established she is physically abusive. Now let's look at how she operated in Big's world. Let's talk about the infamous bird purse party fight, because this incident really explains why Big started putting up walls.
This is a pivotal incident highlighted in the sources. Big invites Carrie to a very high-profile elite party with his inner social circle.
These are wealthy, established, influential people.
Very established. Prior to the event, he gives her a unique, highly expensive, jewel-encrusted purse shaped like a bird.
It's a Judith Leiber bag.
Yes, exactly.
It's incredibly flashy, but in a very specific, wealthy Upper East Side way.
And his intention, as the sources suggest when reading between the lines of his dialogue, is to help integrate her into this upper crust world. He's essentially giving her a piece of armor.
Something that fits the aesthetic of his peers, so she feels like she belongs.
Right. But Carrie, operating from a place of deep, chronic insecurity, interprets this gift as a massive insult.
She thinks he's trying to change her.
She does. She thinks he hates her personal, downtown, eclectic style. She goes to the party already bristling with resentment, basically looking for a reason to be offended.
And when she arrives, she immediately notices that other women at this elite gathering are carrying similar high-end novelty purses.
Now, a rational person might realize, oh, he was trying to help me fit in. He was looking out for me.
Yeah, he was just giving her the dress code.
But Carrie rebels. Instead of appreciating the gesture, she begins to actively, intentionally sabotage the evening.
She acts incredibly rudely to the host of the party. She pulls out a cigarette and attempts to light up right in the middle of a pristine, crowded Upper East Side apartment.
Just zero respect for the space. And when the host politely intervenes, informing her that smoking is only permitted outdoors or on the terrace, Carrie doesn't apologize.
Of course not.
She doesn't respect the boundaries of the home she has been invited into. She rolls her eyes, acts petulant, and treats a basic request for etiquette as an assault on her personal freedom.
She essentially throws a tantrum because she's not the center of attention and she feels out of her depth. But it gets so much worse.
Oh, it really does.
She goes outside to smoke, and she happens to run into a cater waiter she knows from her downtown life, a younger guy named Jared.
And what does she do?
She proceeds to flirt with him, leaves the party entirely with him, and she kisses him. She flat out cheats on Big right outside the very party Big brought her to.
And this is where the sources argue her moral compass completely disintegrates. The very next day, Big calls her. He reaches out, and for the first time in their entire relationship, he makes himself fully vulnerable. He says, "I love you."
And what does Carrie do with that vulnerability? She completely hides the infidelity from the night before.
The sources note her twisted internal rationalization here.
It's wild. She tells herself and her readers that because she kissed the waiter before Big uttered the words, "I love you," The cheating somehow, quote, doesn't count.
It is a stunning display of ethical gymnastics. She completely absolves herself of accountability through a technicality she just invented in her own head.
Just totally rewritten reality.
But the consequence of this night is severe, and it is entirely her fault. Big is a very observant man. The host saw her behavior. His friends saw her behavior.
Everyone saw her leave with the waiter.
Big realizes in that moment that Carrie will never ever assimilate into his world. She is a social liability who acts out when she feels insecure.
And from that point on, he stops taking her to high-profile events. He compartmentalizes her.
He has to for his own social survival.
And this is where the massive Midtown reality document drops a total bomb on the entire narrative structure of the show. They introduce a concept called the Julia Woods Standard.
The Julia Woods Standard is the skeleton key to understanding Mr. Big's motivations throughout the entire series.
Tell me more about Julia Woods.
In the text, Julia Woods is presented not just as a passing date, but as Big's established standard. She is a woman of high status, grace, emotional maturity, and substance.
She is the anti-Carrie.
Precisely. Early on in the narrative, Big introduces Julia to Carrie, and he makes a point to use her full name, Julia Woods.
Why does he use her full name?
The sources point out that this is highly significant in the social vernacular of New York's elite. It signals a level of public respect, permanence, and social legitimacy that he never afforded Carrie. Carrie was just Carrie. Julia Woods is an entity.
Okay, we have to talk about the restaurant scene because it perfectly illustrates the difference between these two women.
Oh, this scene is so painful to watch.
It is. Carrie finds out Big is at a restaurant having a meeting or date with Julia Woods. So Carrie decides to crash it. She walks right up to their table and makes a completely unhinged scene.
Just totally invades their space.
She introduces herself as writing the Sex and the City column, proudly declaring to Julia that Big is giving her, quote, material.
It's so tacky.
She is loud. She demands to know how many women he's dating. She is trying to mark her territory in the most low-class, embarrassing way possible.
And how does Julia Woods react? This is the critical moment that defines Big's tragedy. Julia does not yell. She does not throw a drink.
She doesn't take the bait.
She doesn't engage in a verbal sparring match with Carrie at all. She responds with what the sources term gracious dismissal.
Gracious dismissal. I love that.
Julia realizes immediately that Big is entangled with a volatile, messy tabloid writer, and she simply stands up and walks away.
She just leaves.
She removes herself from the spectacle. She maintains the social order and the dignity that Big values above everything else.
And that loss basically breaks Big.
It shatters him. When Julia walks away, Big loses his primary social anchor to his own world. He realizes in that moment that he has traded a woman of true substance, a true partner, for a woman who views him merely as chaotic content for her column.
So I know what you are probably thinking right now listening to this. For years, decades really, the cultural narrative was that Big was this evil, serial commitment phobe.
A toxic, unavailable man who sadistically strung poor, innocent Carrie along.
Right. But looking at this evidence, we have to ask, was Big actually stringing her along? Or was he a man desperately trying to maintain his own social and professional survival while dealing with a partner who actively, aggressively embarrassed him in public?
It requires a complete paradigm shift, you know? The sources reframe Big entirely. He wasn't afraid of commitment in a vacuum. He was terrified of committing to her.
Because what did she do when she felt insecure about their status?
The text outlines multiple instances of terrifying, genuinely stalker-like behavior that would send any rational person running for the hills.
The church incident. We have to talk about the church incident.
Oh, this is the worst one.
Listen to this. She finds out through the grapevine that Big takes his mother to church every single Sunday. Does she ask Big to introduce her? Does she communicate her desire to meet his family?
No. She stalks them.
She stalks them. She literally follows him and his elderly mother into a Presbyterian church.
Just deeply invasive.
She stands in a pew behind them during the service. And to force an interaction, because Big isn't acknowledging her, she intentionally drops a heavy Bible on the wooden floor.
In the middle of a church service.
Just to make a loud, echoing noise so they are forced to turn around and look at her. It's so invasive.
It is the behavior of an unhinged stalker who respects zero boundaries. And it doesn't stop there. Consider the time she dragged him out to a park at 3 a.m.
Right. I forgot about the park scene.
She is at another party, a completely different event, and a man puts his arm around her.
And instead of just going home or dealing with it, she calls big in the middle of the night.
She wakes him up. She demands he meet her at a local park and tries to force him to commit to standing still with her right then and there.
She constantly manufactures these high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled dramas. The theory posits that Big became trapped in what they call a gritty addiction to Carrie.
She was a bad habit, a chaotic rush that he couldn't break.
He lost his standing with the Julia Woods tier of society, and he found himself stuck in this cyclical loop with a woman who treated him like a muse for her tabloid column, rather than a human being with a life and reputation of his own.
Exactly.
Okay, so if Carrie is this physically abusive, this emotionally manipulative, this socially radioactive, why do we remember her as a glamorous icon?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why did millions of women spend the early 2000s wanting to be her? That brings us to the central thesis of this massive PDF document, which completely unpacks the financial and psychological illusion she constructed.
The core premise of the mid-10 reality theory is that this story is absolutely not a romantic comedy. It is a dark psychological study of an unreliable narrator experiencing a delusional descent.
A delusional descent.
Yes, the glamorous world we see on screen, the brunches, the designer clothes, the effortless city life. The sources argue it is entirely a financial survival mechanism constructed by Carrie to hide a gritty, deeply depressing truth.
The sources contrast the real Carrie with the gloss Carrie.
This contrast is fascinating.
The real Carrie is what we see very briefly in the first few episodes of Season 1. It is reminiscent of that gritty 1999 independent movie 200 Cigarettes.
Right, the real New York of that era wasn't all cosmopolitans and sunshine.
It was cold, it was transactional, it was dirty. The real Carrie was a middle-aged woman living in a dark, cluttered, nicotine-stained shoebox apartment, scraping by on a freelance writer's salary.
But a story about a financially ruined, abusive woman smoking in a dingy apartment doesn't sell books.
No, nobody wants to read that.
It doesn't get syndicated, it doesn't pay the bills. So, especially as the series progressed into the later post-9/11 seasons, Carrie invents the gloss.
She invents the gloss.
She gaslights her audience, and more tragically, she gaslights herself into believing she lives an elite, high-fashion, Upper East Side lifestyle.
The apartment is the perfect example of this fabrication. The document points out a massive geographical lie that most people never noticed.
Oh, the stupid.
Yes. She claims repeatedly to live on the Upper East Side. But the exterior shots of her apartment, the famous brownstone stoop that everyone takes pictures on, that is classic West Village architecture. It's miles away from the Upper East Side.
And why the lie? Because the real Upper East Side apartments that a struggling freelance writer could theoretically afford looked nothing like that beautiful brownstone.
They were cramped, unglamorous boxes.
She utilized the West Village architecture simply because she liked the look, and it fit the fabulous moneyed lie she was selling to her readers.
She was physically and financially bankrupt. The sources explicitly highlight her sheer financial irresponsibility as proof of her arrested development. She famously and proudly admits to spending $40,000 on designer shoes.
$40,000.
While having exactly $0 saved for a down payment on a home.
She had no savings, no assets, no retirement plan, no safety net, nothing.
She's living in a rent-controlled apartment she doesn't own, with a closet full of shoes she can't eat, facing middle age with absolutely nothing of substance to her name.
It is a lifestyle blueprint designed to fail. It is mathematically impossible to sustain. But she couldn't admit that failure to her readers because her identity was tied to being the it girl.
So she retreated into what the text calls a safe daydream.
She had to project this image of being a wealthy, carefree fashion icon to keep her notoriety alive so she could pay her skyrocketing visa bill.
Here is where this gets really interesting for you. Think of Carrie's column as the original toxic Instagram filter.
Oh, that is a perfect analogy.
Long before social media even existed, she was creating a completely fabricated, highly curated, aesthetically perfect feed to hide a deeply depressing, isolated, bankrupt reality.
She was an influencer before the word existed, and she was faking her entire life.
And that isolation is key to understanding her psychology. The document refers to the show not as a celebration of friendship, but as an autopsy of social death.
Social death. Think about how she interacts with the city. She uses the city streets, the high-end cafes, the bustling restaurants as her living room.
Why does she do that?
Because her real apartment is a sad, dark, lonely shoebox.
Exactly. And the text points out a crucial, devastating detail. We almost never see her cooking or eating a real meal alone in her apartment. The kitchen is completely dead space.
It's used to store sweaters in the oven.
Sweaters in the oven. By never cooking, by constantly fleeing into the noisy city, she avoids facing the domestic reality of her life.
She avoids the silence.
She totally avoids this silence.
She avoids looking at the empty chairs at her table. She avoids the reality of being an isolated woman with, frankly, nothing to show for her life but a collection of expensive footwear.
She convinced herself and her readers that the city itself was her partner. I'm dating New York. It's a tragic alibi.
He really is.
She is essentially a ghost haunting the cafes of Manhattan, pretending she's at the center of the universe when she's actually completely, utterly alone.
Which brings up the most disturbing reality-bending question of the entire analysis. If she is entirely alone, alienated by her own abusive behavior and financial ruin, who are the three women she's always having brunch with?
Oh my God. This next theory from the documents is genuinely unsettling. It completely rewrites the entire series, and it focuses on the psychological breakdown of Carrie Bradshaw.
This is the part that completely blew my mind.
The claim here is that Carrie's toxicity didn't just ruin her relationship with Big, it systematically destroyed her friendships.
Yes. The Midtown Reality document proposes a truly dark, forensic reading of the text. It argues that by the end of season 1, Carrie had actually ruined all of her real-life friendships.
All of them.
She burned her bridges because she viewed her friends purely as material for her column, rather than as actual human beings with boundaries and feelings.
Right. We see this constantly. She betrays their privacy week after week. She broadcasts their most intimate, humiliating, painful secrets to the entire city of New York just to meet her weekly word count.
She exploits their lives for her own financial gain.
No one would stay friends with someone who does that.
No one in reality. So the theory states that the squad we see in the later seasons, these 4 women spending every waking hour together, constantly available for brunch and drama, is not real.
It's not real.
They are a psychological projection. They are elaborate hallucinations or fictional avatars created by Carrie to hide her total social alienation.
Wow.
It is a defense mechanism to prevent her from realizing she is completely alone in that apartment.
When I first read this, I was really skeptical. Hallucinating your 3 best friends for years. That sounds like acute schizophrenia. Is it possible that's just, an extreme, edgy internet interpretation of the text?
I mean, it sounds extreme on the surface, yes, but the source grounds it deeply in established psychological theory.
How so?
The function of the theory is to illustrate how Carrie's narcissism operated, whether they're literal psychotic hallucinations or just extreme fictional exaggerations she invented for her writing. The point is she fractured her own psyche into archetypes to cope with her massive cognitive dissonance.
Okay, when you look at the psychology here, it's mind-blowing. Let's break down those archetypes.
Let's do it.
Miranda clearly represents her superego. Miranda is the logic, the cynical reality, the grounded career focus, and the voice of reason that Carrie completely ignores in her real life.
Yes, Miranda is the part of Carrie's brain telling her to save money and stop chasing unavailable men, which Carrie constantly argues with and dismisses.
And what about Samantha?
Then you have Samantha, who operates purely as her weaponized libido. Samantha is the personification of the agenda to act like a man, having purely transactional sex without emotional attachment.
So she uses the idea of Samantha to excuse her own behavior.
Exactly. Carrie uses the Samantha projection to validate her own promiscuity and to avoid feeling the deep shame and rejection of her failed relationships. If Samantha does it proudly, Carrie doesn't have to feel bad about her own choices.
And Charlotte is the ego ideal, or the Madonna archetype. Charlotte represents the traditional, established life, the family unit, the stability, and the old money security that Carrie secretly, desperately craves.
But because Carrie can't have it, she uses the Charlotte avatar as a punching bag.
Right. Constantly mocking her traditional values to pretend she doesn't actually want them.
The proof the document offers for this hallucination theory is incredibly dark.
This is the part that got me.
There is a famous storyline where Miranda's mother dies, and Carrie rushes to Pennsylvania to support her. The text suggests that in reality, it was Carrie's mother who died.
Oh, this part is just brutal.
It is a grief swap. The theory argues that Carrie could not face the raw, agonizing reality of being an isolated, grieving orphan, so she projected that profound grief onto her hallucinated logic figure, Miranda.
By assigning the tragedy to Miranda, Carrie completely insulates herself from the pain.
Completely.
She gets to play the role of the heroic, supportive, selfless friend. She gets to write a beautiful, poignant column about the power of female friendship, rather than facing the bleak, lonely reality of standing entirely by herself at her own mother's funeral.
She uses human trauma as a narrative device to make herself look good.
And this inability to deal with reality, this need to rewrite the narrative, to make herself the victim or the hero, extends perfectly to how she treated Big's eventual wife, Natasha.
Oh, Natasha. The document calls Natasha Julia 2.0.
Yes, let's talk about Natasha. When Big moves to Paris for work, he meets Natasha, a young, elegant, wealthy woman, and he marries her very quickly.
He does. And the theory explains that Natasha was a strategic filler marriage. Big was trying to prove to his elite social circle, and specifically to the memory of the original Julia Woods, that he was capable of being a stable, established, respectable husband.
And Carrie, predictably, loses her mind.
Completely loses it.
She suffers what psychologists call a narcissistic injury, a severe blow to her ego because her entire fabricated reality relies on her being the center of Big's universe.
With Natasha in the picture, Carrie is relegated to the role of the other woman. She's not the glamorous wife. She is the dirty, hidden secret.
So she begins relentlessly stalking Natasha. The sources note how she follows her to the Hamptons. She constantly, obsessively compares herself to this younger, wealthier, more emotionally stable woman.
And she does this awful thing where she refers to Natasha in her column as an idiot stick figure with no soul.
She deliberately dehumanizes her.
She has to dehumanize her, because if Natasha is a real breathing woman with a soul, with feelings and a life, then Carrie has to look in the mirror and admit that she is actively destroying another woman's life by sleeping with her husband.
So she reduces her to a cartoon.
Exactly. And the absolute peak of this toxicity, the crescendo of her narcissism, is the infamous apology lunch.
It is the ultimate act of social sabotage. Carrie tracks down Natasha while she's having a quiet lunch at a restaurant. Carrie sits down, completely uninvited, traps Natasha at the table, and forces her to listen to an apology for the affair.
And we have to ask why she apologizes. Is she actually remorseful for the pain she caused?
Absolutely not.
She does it entirely to clear her own slate. She is force-feeding forgiveness to Natasha so she can stop feeling the uncomfortable weight of her own guilt.
She needs Natasha to say, it's okay, so Carrie can go back to writing herself as the innocent American girl next door in her column.
She weaponizes her own guilt to hold Natasha hostage. But Natasha's response is one of the greatest moments in the series.
It really is.
Because it is the Midtown reality breaking straight through Carrie's delusion. Natasha gives her a cold, hard, devastating dismissal.
She tells Carrie she doesn't care about her apology, that her apology is entirely self-serving, and that she has ruined her life.
It is a stark, jarring reminder that in the real New York, a woman of status has absolutely no interest in a tabloid writer's performative, self-serving guilt trip.
Natasha refuses to be a supporting character in Carrie's fictional redemption arc.
She just won't do it.
It's a brilliant reality check. Which leads us to the final act of this deep dive. If everything we've seen is a glossy lie, if the friendships are fractured projections, if the glamour is a financial house of cards, what actually happened to Mr. Big?
The sources bring the narrative to a staggering conclusion that completely upends the famous happily ever after that was sold to the audience.
The ending everyone thinks they know.
Right. According to the meticulous timeline in the Midtown reality document, Big and Carrie absolutely did not end up together.
No romantic reunion in Paris.
Yeah.
No big movie wedding with the Vivienne Westwood dress.
None of it. The truth is much darker and much more realistic. The stress of Big's dual life, juggling his desperate need for elite status with his gritty, toxic addiction to the erratic, abusive Carrie, ultimately destroyed his health.
He literally made himself sick.
He failed at his proof marriage to Natasha. He lost the respect of his peers because of his association with Carrie, and he was effectively run out of Manhattan.
He was exiled from the very society he valued above all else.
He retreated to California, and not for a sunny, fresh start, but as a fugitive from a life he had completely dismantled. And his true fate, according to the psychological timeline of the sources, he dies alone in California of heart failure.
He dies. The great Mr. Big, the Titan of New York, dies alone on the West Coast.
Yes. The text suggests that shortly after reading Carrie's published book, he reaches out to offer one final apology.
Too little, too late.
He realizes, much too late, that his addiction to this physically volatile, toxic woman cost him his social soul. He allowed a messy sex columnist to document his slow descent from a New York titan to a lonely exile.
He is reduced to a tragic, embarrassing footnote in her story.
It's just sad.
So if Big died in California, what the hell happens in Paris? Because the end of the television series famously features Carrie moving to Paris with a Russian artist, being abandoned in a hotel room, and Big miraculously swooping in to save her.
The Paris sequence is the ultimate delusion. It is the final break from reality.
So none of it happened.
The text explains that Paris stripped away all of Carrie's primary defense mechanisms. She didn't have her hallucinated friends to act as buffers. She didn't have her familiar New York cafes to hide in.
She was entirely exposed.
She was standing completely alone in a foreign, high-fashion city where she didn't speak the language, feeling the crushing weight of her reality.
Which is that she is aging, she has $40,000 in shoes, she has zero assets, she has no career prospects there, and she is totally, utterly alone.
She is facing the absolute void. She cannot face the raw, deafening silence of her life.
So what does a writer do when faced with a reality they cannot survive? They write a new one. She resurrects Mr. Big.
It is so chilling.
It really is.
The famous hotel lobby reunion where he tells her she's the one, subsequent movies, the marriages, the sources argue these are entirely fabricated.
It's a total fiction.
They are the desperate hallucinations of a broke, isolated writer who needed a romantic ending to sell her books and pay off her crushing debt.
She couldn't admit to her readers, or to herself, that her abusive behavior and lifestyle choices had left her abandoned. So she wrote a fairy tale rescue to mask the fact that she was left totally alone in the dark.
It is incredibly dark, but this is where the text brings in a much larger sociological point about what this show actually did to the culture.
The predictive programming element.
Yes, the document argues that this narrative served as predictive programming. Now, predictive programming is a term usually used to describe how media conditions the public to accept future events. But here, it means the show conditioned an entire generation of women to accept a toxic blueprint for their own lives.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are looking at isn't a romance, it's a social autopsy.
It really is. The show conditioned viewers to idolize an abusive dynamic. It told them to prioritize a transient squad over building a stable family unit.
It told them to prioritize rampant consumerism, $40,000 in shoes, over tangible financial security, like a down payment on a house or a retirement fund.
It sold the absolute lie that if you act like an emotionally unavailable man, if you treat relationships as disposable, if you respond to conflict with physical violence,
And if you live entirely for the aesthetic gloss, that a wealthy titan will eventually swoop in, forgive all your abuse, and save you.
but the reality is that blueprint leads to arrested development.
It leads to you standing alone in a rent-controlled apartment you don't even own, hallucinating a rescue that is never, ever coming.
She chose a fictional blueprint over the health and stability of an established life, and she dragged her audience down with her.
Okay, we need to take a collective breath, because we have just completely dismantled a pop culture monument. Let's synthesize the journey we've just been on. We took that soft-focused, nostalgic lens, and we smashed it on the pavement.
We really did. We stripped away the designer labels, the Manolo Blahniks, and the cosmopolitan cocktails.
And what we found underneath was a narrator who physically abused her partner while he slept, stalked her romantic rivals in churches and at lunches,
Alienated every real friend she had by treating them as tabloid fodder.
and ultimately retreated into a complete psychological fabrication to avoid facing her own financial ruin and toxic choices.
It means we have to be incredibly rigorously careful about the narratives we consume and the relationships we idolize.
Because sometimes the glamorous hero of the story is actually the villain holding the pen, writing the script to hide their own crimes and their own profound emptiness.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
We've established through this forensic reading that Carrie's friends were likely psychological projections, fragments of her own fractured psyche used to cope with her reality.
Yes, the superego, the libido, the ego ideal.
Well, if she is capable of hallucinating an entire support system, is it possible that the legendary Mr. Big wasn't a singular real man at all?
Oh my God.
What if Big was just an amalgamation of every decent man she ever pushed away, with her physical volatility, her abuse, and her emotional chaos?
That is wild.
What if she condensed them all into one giant, unattainable white whale to justify to herself why a woman who demanded absolutely everything ultimately ended up with nothing?
That is a haunting thought. Because once you put the harsh light on the x-ray, you realize the disease was always there, right in the center of the frame. You just have to know what you were looking at. Thank you so much for joining us on this intense deep dive into the Midtown reality. Keep questioning the stories you've been told, look past the filter, and we'll see you next time.